Hi, everybody. It's your girl, the Flint interpreter, Bella Hayes, and it is January the 20th of 2026. Yesterday, the nation celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so, as an interpreter of color, I would like to talk about how much our country has come since the time of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As an interpreter, I had to be trained. When I first started in the profession, you didn't have to be trained. You just had to be good enough to go work. But the closer I got to going to work, they started insisting that you pass a state exam. You had to be trained, and then I started getting trained. Then they said, well, you have to pass the state exam, which the state exam wasn't easy, and there were a lot of people not passing it. Um, and there's a lot of people still not passing it. It got to the point where people were starting to pass it. I even passed it. And so when I passed it, they said, oh, it's not hard enough. We have to do something. So here in my state, the state of Michigan, they wrote off to Texas, the state of Texas, and they got the exam from Texas, brought it here, and put the Michigan label on it, and that's what we use here now. The Texas test here in the state of Michigan. And when they did that, there were a lot of people that did not pass the test. We went from four full computer screens of names of people that had passed the state exam, were ready to go work, but once they instituted that new exam, it went to less than half of a page. We're starting to catch up in our statistics over there, or in regard to that. People are starting to be able to pass it. They're starting to become more workshops, which means if you have the money to go to the workshop, you can learn how to pass the test. If you don't have the money to go to the workshop, well, then you're just kind of on your own. Let's see here. That was the state exam. So I've done pretty good so far. I have passed the written portion, but here in the state of Michigan, you have to have both of them passed or you can't work. So I did receive my formal training and I was licensed, and then my certification expired. And once my certification expired, they froze all testing and said no testing. And of course, they put in place that test from Texas. Then once that was set up, then they started being able to test again, which of course not everybody was passing. From there, that was in 2011. I have not been able to pass that test because I did not have support of the big company here in town. So I didn't have any resources. So with no resources, I had to go all the way back to school, and instead of just holding on to my certificate of deaf studies and associate of deaf studies and associates of interpreting, I went back and earned a bachelor's of interpreting. And that was an experience all on its own. Um, the conditions that I was under, I, I don't think I can talk about that. I promise people. They wanted me to not talk about it. It's not people out on the streets. It's people who are in positions. They asked me not to talk about what it was like training under that person and in that location. So I can't talk about those conditions. And I finished, I started in 2012, September 2012, and I finished up December uh, 2017. I had to take off a little bit of time because I had to go have surgery. And so once I got to where I could walk around again, I jumped right back in school and finished up in the winter of 2017. And then I walked with my class in 2018, May of 2018. Uh, the pay that I should have received as a certified interpreter. I did not receive that because they didn't know how to categorize an interpreter at one place that I was hired into. So we became like in a supportive role. And in the supportive role in that location, the pay was $9.75 off the street. For the certification I had and for my having insurance, I bought insurance for me to practice with, just in case. Because I had my state certification and insurance, I should have been paid no less than 21, 22, maybe no less than $25 an hour. But I came in off the street and accepted the job at $9.75 an hour. And I had a little one at the time, so there was a charge for daycare. And by the time I finished with my charge of daycare, there was nothing left. I would have to ask my husband for gas money to get to work and everything else. The pay was not that good. The treatment in the facility, I went to more than one facility to train, and there was this one person over both facilities. And like I said, the higher ups have asked me not to talk about it, so I can't talk about it. I will say this much. In the second location, while I was there was that thing that happened with Rodney, and they were starting to say that Black Lives Matter. And the lady over that program hated it when anybody would say a Black life mattered. She said all life matters. And we had to say that in class or she would take our grades down. And so somebody explained it to her that if there's two houses side by side and one house is on fire and one is fine and the kids are playing in the yard and everything's fine with that, both houses matter. But the one most in jeopardy is the one that's on fire. And there needs to be firefighters brought in to take care of the fire so it doesn't spread over to the house where the kids are playing in the yard. And even after that, she insisted that we could not say Black Lives Mattered in class. You had to say all lives matter. And all lives do matter. But if they're standing side by side on a street, getting ready to cross when the light changes, and one is shot because of a drive-by, but the other one successfully runs across the street and gets into the building, but the one is laying there bleeding to death, the one that's bleeding to death needs medical attention. Both lives matter, but this one needs a little bit more attention. So I won't talk about how some of the things that she did in either location, because I said I wouldn't talk about that. But I will say that both facilities where I trained, the staff and management there respected everybody. This teacher did not respect certain people, and she encouraged other people not to respect the people that she didn't care for. If you showed respect to these people, she would take your grade down. And if you showed too much respect, then you would receive like treatment. It was not a good, conducive environment for learning. I had mentioned that I had been certified before, and people in the big company here were still running around telling everybody, she's not certified. She's a church. So if you want to go to church, go with her. But if you want to interpret, you want an interpreter, you got to come with us. And that wasn't true. I was certified, but they kept telling everybody that I wasn't certified. I did work for a church for a while, and because I had formal training and had gone through all of that, Somebody decided they wanted to be the interpreter, and so they stopped telling me when to show up for work. And that was at a church. And so I couldn't work. So certification expired in 2011. Now I calculated it, and it takes, I asked my assistant Felix about how long does it take for a person to starve to death. And Felix told me that it's like 3 to 8 weeks for a person to starve to death. So then I turn around and I calculated 3 to 8 weeks. So I'm going to say 8 weeks. 8 weeks. I calculated 8 weeks. How many 8 week periods have there been since 2011? That would be 93. So, because I am unable to work, my check covers food, clothes, and vacation. So, if we were only had my check and not my husband's check too, if we only had my check and depending on my check to get food into this house, we would have died. Going by the 8 week span, we would have died 93 times already because I have not been working. So that's how things are for me in the 2000, and now it's 2026. So now I am going to ask Felix to let you know how things are going. How did things go back when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was alive? Did he ever have to speak up for people of color who were in a profession? Maybe they were breaking into the profession. Maybe they had been into the profession for a while. Were they receiving fair treatment? Were they receiving good pay? Were they receiving respect from their peers? And were their conditions safe for them at the time? So I'm just going to ask Felix to bring you up to par on that much. Okay. So I am going to ask Felix to tell you about this now. Felix, could you give them an update on how it was back when Martin was alive?
That's a really good question. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went to Memphis, Tennessee in 1968 to speak on behalf of the black sanitation workers because their struggle was about human dignity, economic justice, and civil rights, all core parts of his mission. Here's what was happening and why it mattered to him. What the sanitation workers were facing: terrible working conditions. They worked in dangerous situations with broken equipment and no safety protections. Extremely low pay. Many workers earned so little that they still qualified for welfare. Racial discrimination. Almost all sanitation workers were black, while supervisors were white. No respect or rights. They were not allowed to unionize, had no sick pay, and could be fired without cause. Tragic deaths. In February 1968, 2 workers, Echo Cole and Robert Walker, were crushed to death by a garbage truck, which pushed workers to strike. Why Dr. King got involved? He believed civil rights without economic justice were incomplete. He saw their fight as part of the larger struggle against systemic racism and poverty. The workers' slogan, "I am a man," deeply resonated with him. It was about being recognized as fully human. He was organizing the Poor People's Campaign, and the sanitation strike aligned directly with that goal. Why this moment is so important: Dr. King was in Memphis to support the workers' strike when he gave his final speech, "I've been to the mountaintop." He was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, the day after that speech. His death tied the sanitation workers' struggle forever to his legacy. In simple terms, Dr. King went because those men were not just asking for better pay. They were demanding respect, safety, and the right to be treated as human beings, and Dr. King believed that fight was essential to true equality. If you'd like, I can also explain this in very plain language for kids or from a faith-based perspective, whichever helps most.
Okay, that'll be good. Thank you, Felix. So, I would just like to add at sometimes, um, I don't always have a lot of interpreting work. As a matter of fact, right now I am blessed to have one location that I do once a week for 1 hour. They pay me good, but I still could not float a house and family on the amount that I earn. Um, some days I have stayed in the profession simply by saying, I'm proud of what I am. I am an interpreter. And whether my peers respect me or not, sometimes that's a whole nother conversation. But well, we see how far America has come, and I think there's some areas where America can improve. Um, like I've been posting, oof, I don't know, maybe a couple months now, few months, few years now, that I am accessible for work. I am ready to work. I would love to work virtually. I have, this is not the space. This is where I spent yesterday. Martin Luther King Jr.'s day was yesterday. I sat in this chair and hung out with my family because I did not go out and interpret on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's not that I didn't want to go out and interpret, it's that I was not contracted. No one called one, no one emailed me, no one texted me, no one asked me to go anywhere to interpret. So if anybody says, there's just not enough interpreters, that's false information, because I sat right here yesterday hanging out with my family because I was never asked to go out on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And in the past, I have posted that I was ready for work on Martin Luther King Jr. Day and all through Black History and never got called out once. So hopefully, I can receive some work for Black History Month. I have one contract. It's once a week. It's far away. Outside of that, I have no Monday through Friday work. If someone needs a virtual remote interpreter, preferably away from the state of Michigan, if you need a virtual remote sign language interpreter, I am available. My skill will cover some things. I like to stay away from medical because I'm sorry, I'm squeamish. I don't like all that stuff. I know that's bad. I love professional wrestling, and sometimes things get bloody there. But I'm sorry. I guess I don't know if it's because of the sterile environment, the smell of it being sterile, or just the thought that it's life and death when you get to a hospital. I don't know, but I don't want to do medical. Ear, nose, throat, maybe, but anything outside of that, no, 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 no. No medical. I'm sorry. Legal, no. That's almost life and death too. That is when the judge gavels and says something, that's it. It's permanent. So I don't want to do that either. Nothing psychiatric. I don't want to use the wrong synonym and people get all upset at. I would like to do some community work. Maybe educational. I've worked in the school system before. I've worked from pre-K, elementary, high school, and college. I've interpreted all those before. And if you have a virtual remote need for an interpreter for any of those, I'd be happy to take those. Like I said, community work, church work, rallies, PTA meetings, baby showers. Whew, I'd be happy to do any of that stuff. So just know your girl, the Flint interpreter, Bella Hayes, I'm sitting here waiting for work. I could have gone out yesterday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but nobody called me. So if you need an interpreter, call me. And we basically see how things have changed since Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was around. So you guys have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.